Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Excellent. So basically, the slides were whipped up kind of on the way here. They're not like Nicholas's slides that are full of pictures and fun stuff. They're mostly just text, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about what we built, and then we're going to show it, and then answer some questions. So the basic point that at least got me starting in this, and that I think is really exciting about server-side JavaScript, is that context switching really sucks. It's okay, you're a Python guy and you know JavaScript and you have no problem at all going back and forth. And then one day you start, you save some Python file and it doesn't work, and you look at it and you don't understand why it's not working, and you're on a deadline and you realize you put semicolons all over the damn place. So I'm not a Python guy, but I've made similar mistakes in JavaScript, going back and forth between JavaScript and PHP. It's ugly. So basically, for the typical LAMP stack, you've got JavaScript for the client, you got PHP for the server, you got some Apache Insanity for URI rerouting, which has regular expressions, and don't even get me started about Apache 1.3 versus 2.2 and how they handle those. You got this other domain-specific language, either MySQL or some other SQL something for data, and it basically comes down to at least 4 languages, probably a lot more. So one way to fix a lot of that is to ditch this whole concept of having a file server and just go straight to using an application. And this is something that Ruby and Python folks have been doing for a pretty long time. So we've got Rack on Ruby, WSGI on Python. There's a couple other implementations. I'm sure whatever your favorite language of choice is probably coming pretty soon. So the problem is with that, with using Rack or WSGI or Django or what have you, is that you still end up having to use JavaScript. You still end up having to go back and forth because whatever's on the client is going to be running JavaScript. There's a couple ways around that. One of them is to compile your Ruby or your Python code down to client-side JavaScript. That works. It adds a compilation step, which is arguably just as bad as a context switch. Another possibility is to build for something other than the web browser, like I think, what is it, Titanium, that supports Python, client-side Python and Ruby. But then you have to bundle the interpreter with your application, and if you're not building for web browsers, you're not really building a web app. So also on the data side, you've got ORMs, or which kind of tries to map your relational database table structure to something that is more native to your programming language. But most of the time, you end up sharding and having this big table of just a handful of records, and it's mostly one table that you're looking at most of the time, and it ends up being a total waste of all this relational power. So if JavaScript is your favorite language, you actually get to use JavaScript from top to bottom here. So you've got, obviously, JavaScript for the client. We've got a server running in JavaScript. We've got JavaScript for our URI rerouting. JavaScript for our data connection layer, and basically just one language end to end, which is wonderful. So the common JS group, there's a handful of them in the room. If you were taking advantage of those networking times, you probably met a few of them. Basically just a bunch of programmers who think this is a good idea, that are, there's an IRC channel and a wiki and a message group and lots of bike shedding, and the goal is to kind of come up with a spec so that we can have programs that run on different implementations of a server-side JavaScript stack. So you can write your program and it'll actually work in multiple JavaScript environments. Now, of course, there's leaky abstractions. We know how well that works when you write JavaScript for one browser and expect it to run in all the browsers, but it's a little better than that. Narwhal is a specific implementation of CommonJS. It's the one that we used. I've been playing with it for a while. It's pretty cool. There's a lot of pink text all over the web pages. That's it. So we'll say, I'm sure there'll be questions. We'll probably say more about exactly what Narwhal is and what CommonJS is and what JSGI and what Jack is. Later on, I'm just trying to give you kind of a basic idea for how to understand this. How do you guys pronounce JSGI? I've been saying JSGI, but I know WSGI is usually pronounced whiskey. That sounds. Is it just like sky? Yeah, I guess J Sky would be kind of like JSON versus.
I heard Jizzy.
Yeah, that. I don't know. Let's try to keep this G-rated. Okay, right. So I'm going to keep calling it JSGI until somebody gives me a really cool pronunciation for it. Yeah. Okay, so we can go. So Jack is an implementation of JSGI. It was built by Tom Robinson, who is in the room. You can bug him later. It's an implementation of JSGI on Narwhal, and it's a collection of a bunch of middleware pieces that you can kind of use to mix and match and build your application. It's kind of like Rack, but it's JavaScript, so you change the R to, instead of Ruby, so you change the R to a J. Let me down, dude. So tic-tac-toe, Matt and I had this idea that we were going to write a game on, on server-side JS and kind of to see what this stack can do and actually use it for a proper project. It turns out then that I misinterpreted when exactly this conference was, thinking that it was in November. Don't ask me why. The email that I got, it clearly said September 8th, but then when I looked at it, I was like, oh, crap, that's a week. And that was when the announcement had gone up on Meetup and YUI blog, so it was kind of, we were committed. So we said, okay, well, what can we do in a week? We can't actually have a full-featured game. Let's have a not full-featured game. So it's a very quickly whipped up game that it runs on Jack. It took about 2 solid days of programming, but it was pretty easy. And also it's, we're pretty awesome, so that helped. And the code and the slides are both up on my GitHub repository. Demo time. That's your cue. There's more slides after that too.
Okay. Do it.
It changed size. All right, there we go. So here we go. We've got 2 different web browsers. When you first connect, it gives you a cookie if you don't already have one. It makes a call to a view sitting in the CouchDB database. I can show you guys the code for that in a minute to find out what the newest game ID should be. And then it just basically hits our server-side layer to create a game. Rather than doing any kind of complicated like in-memory caching stuff, which would be super, super smart and you would definitely want to do before putting this on a public server, instead we just say CouchDB is our cache. And that's our concurrency, that's our in-memory everything. It's probably a good idea anyway, because in-process memory can kind of get corrupted or fall apart or what have you if you restart your server. Yeah, and so Matt whipped up some client-side stuff, and as you can see, it's just polling the server every time you make a move. And you don't know how to play tic-tac-toe. Right, and it's he's not as friendly. My error messages are so friendly, I swear. His, not so much. Well, no, the loser message says, it says, way to lose, loser. Play again, refresh the page. I'm not going to hold your damn hand. It does. Well, it's encouraging you to be competent and act on your own. It's not, you don't want to baby your users because then they get weak. Oh, okay. So,
Are you going to get into that?
yeah, let's get into that. You're right, though. That's why I keep you around.
I love so much.
I know. So we demoed. Okay, so I'm going to tell you the ending before we get into really the details and the nitty gritty, so you can see where we're going. If you need if you need a professional level app, if you have like your boss is getting on you to build this thing and you haven't started it, and you've got investors who are like banging down your door, and you know your startup is going to go belly up if you don't get this app out yesterday, might not want to use server-side JavaScript. It's very exciting, and it's moving really, really fast, and it can do a lot of really impressive things right now. But it's not at the level of maturity of, you know, say Rack or Django. But if you are going to be taking a while to build something, if you're getting started on a project now that you know you've got some flexibility on, you absolutely could get a lot out of using CommonJS. And I have nothing but good stuff to say about Jack and Narwhal. The biggest thing that I can say about it is that it was really fun to build. You know, there was when you remove that piece of having to change languages repeatedly throughout the course of your development, it really is just a very liberating experience. And what's also great about that, there's one class in particular where, let's say you have a form validation code, right? At some point you have to express in some kind of a code what qualifies as a valid name, what qualifies as a valid username, what qualifies as a valid zip code and phone number, and so on and so forth. And it's different in different internationalizations and different locales or what have you. And you want to do that on the client side because that's nice, right? So you can give immediate feedback to the user. They don't have to wait until they submit the form and then, oh, now you tell me I have a typo in my phone number. Thanks. But at the same time, if they don't have JavaScript, you still need to be doing that same validation on your server side because that's also, you know, a lot of times a security issue, right? If somebody has an invalid, put some XSS script in their username and now your whole site is compromised. You end up having to write that code. At least here at Yahoo, we end up having to write that code a lot in both PHP and JavaScript, or both Java and JavaScript. Or you have to do all of those calls by AJAX, and you have to have some server-side validate form API, and then there's, you know, you write your username, and then you tab 3 fields down, and now it's sending out the request, and it comes back asynchronously and says, oh, your username's invalid. So now you have to go back up to that one, and it's just a big pain. In this case, when you're using server-side JavaScript, there's a lot of cases where you can actually write that code once and use exactly the same file on the client and on the server. In fact, in our game, we have some logic around, you know, what's a valid move and how do you know whether or not a move wins the game and whose turn is it and so on. Basically, the whole game of tic-tac-toe. I mean, it doesn't sound like a lot of things, but there's a lot of little kind of moving parts in that. And we have one board.js that is exactly the same code on the client as it is on the server. That was fun. You guys want to see some code? Yeah. All right.
I'd like Matt to explain it. He's just a pretty face.
Yeah, he's just here to make me look good. Or worse.
You've all written code twice before where you've got your PHP validation and your JavaScript validation. The really cool thing about this project was I wrote the board class, which tic-tac-toe is not complicated, but having to write that once on the server and then get on the client is just kind of bitch work. Nobody wants to do that. And having to write it once and giving it off to Isaac, and he can call the exact same methods that I am, is really, really nice. It saved us a lot of time, and that's what enabled us to write this in 2 days. And you've got some things on the client that you're not going to be in the server and vice versa. But when you have JavaScript, which is really trivial to make an event-based system, you just say, well, I'm going to listen to this event. So on the server, when you fire off a move, I got to hit my CouchDB. And on the client, you say, when I fire off my move, I need to show that on the screen, which when you're rendering your board, that's irrelevant to the server, but you want to show that to the client. So you write the code once, you listen to events, and you're done on both sides. It makes less code, which, as you all know, is usually better code. This is your machine.
None of that's on the video, I don't think.
Oh, my bad.
Oh, well.
You even told me that. Sorry.
Yeah, you guys, that was exclusive. That's not going to be online on the video.
You had to be here.
Yeah, seriously. So this is the only, really the only bit that, you know, kind of was awkward or like wonky, crufty stuff that needed to be added in. And it's not even really necessary. I mean, we could have done that in some other client-side file. But basically, we just have this one thing that says, if the exports object is not defined, then define it. And then hang it off of exports.board. And now on the server side, if if I look at some server-side code that calls that board class, I'm hoping I don't have any like horrible, awful cursing in my comments here. Oh, right. So here I have board equals require tic-tac-toe / board dot board. That's a basic bit of how it works. It was very straightforward to understand. This is kind of what the whole common JS modules approach to writing code is. You define a exports object. When you require your class, when you require your module, it returns that exports object. A Jack application is basically a collection of these app functions. So you can see here I've got a URL map file that just maps /game and /move to various different things. I call the jack.urlmap plugin to turn that into an application. And then you can do some very clever and tricky things with small pieces of application logic like this, where you have an app. I have a function that returns an application, and basically what that's doing is this is called a middleware. So it'll do something interesting to the resulting output. And then at the end, you just set exports.app to your app, and there it goes. Trying to find like a smaller, like what an app looks like. Basically, an app kind of looks like this. You've got a function that takes an environment variable, an environment hash. You do something to it, and then you return a status headers and body type object, and Jack spits that back out to the browser. What else do you want to show? CouchDB stuff?
That's pretty interesting.
I think my couch isn't running. All right, CouchDB has started. Time to relax. Anybody here used CouchDB before? Have you used CouchDB before, anybody?
2, 3, 4.
Okay, a couple people. Yeah, basically CouchDB is just a document store. So each of our games here is expressed as a document where we have the history and who's sitting at O and who's sitting at X and who the winner is and whose turn it is. That's a bug right there. I fixed that already, but this is an old game. You also have these things called views, so we can figure out what should the next seat be if I were to try and sit down at a new game. Those are expressed as small JavaScript functions as well. So really what's very exciting about all this is being able to use JavaScript as every point in your application stack. And you could make the argument that some other language is better, but either you've got a compilation step that turns your client-side code into JavaScript, or you've got JavaScript end-to-end. I like JavaScript already anyway, so that was an easy choice. So does he. And yeah, that's it. Any questions? Yes.
Just reminds me of the days of Netscape with the live script. So what's the performance on this?
Well, the performance is not great. That's for tic-tac-toe, it works really, really well, as you saw. I mean, it was pretty snappy. It's also running on localhost, and it's on that box. But the nice thing about this, seriously, part of the reason why it's not great performance is because it's running on top of Rhino, and it's running in interpreted mode on Rhino. It's not pre-compiling. Doesn't pre-compile anything, right? Okay. Yeah, so it's interpreted mode on Rhino, which is just slow. There is work being done to build a narwhal interpreter layer for V8, which is much faster. The whole point of Narwhal, though, is you can, once those V8 hackers are done with the V8 Narwhal plugin, I can take my program and just put it on that, and it'll keep working the same.
I just wanted to point out that another server-side JavaScript library called Node.js, which is written on top of V8 and doesn't quite conform, or really even come close to conforming to the Narwhal spec. But what it does give us an idea of like benchmarks, and it outperforms a lot of other competitors. Like it outperforms Twisted in Python and Event Machine in Ruby, and it even outperforms like some apps that are written against, say, like Lighty and like CGI, calling into C, which is pretty good. So you can get like concurrency up to like tens of thousands of people. So it's not a limitation of JavaScript. It's just, as you said, you were running on Rhino.
Yeah. So the comment was Node.js is wicked fast, and I can definitely assert that as well. It seemed to me like Common.js is kind of the direction that has the most momentum behind it. Node.js is pretty exciting. And if you do need something that's production ready and scales to a bajillion users, Node.js is a pretty good option.
How does this compare to, I'm not sure of the name, but Axon or Axe, H-A-X?
Hakes, H-A-X-E.
Yeah.
Usually the X is capitalized.
Yeah, something like that.
The difference is that Hakes is with Hakes you write in the Hakes language, and then Hakes can be compiled to client-side JavaScript, or I think there's like a server-side interpreter.
But it's JavaScript. It's still JavaScript.
It's
right?
not exactly JavaScript. It's JavaScript-ish.
I mean, it's a much more strict version of JavaScript. Or maybe
It's closer to the. At least last I looked at Hakes, it's been a while, but when I did look at it, it was closer to the Harmony, or what was called ECMAScript 4 spec. So you have, and I think ActionScript 3 is similar to that as well.
Yeah.
So Hakes you can actually compile to ActionScript or PHP or Hakes server-side script or server-side JS. It's not a bad option, but it puts you in a similar boat, in my opinion, to the writing your app end-to-end in Ruby and then compiling your client-side part. I'm not a Hakes expert, and I don't want to come across as one, so take everything I'm saying with a grain of salt.
Okay. Good.
Okay. Want to say anything? Any questions for Matt?
Where'd you get that hat?
My girlfriend?
No company's names.
He got the hat from his girlfriend.
Great, thanks guys.
Thanks.